Toby was confused, unable to understand what was happening. The family car, which always took him on fun-filled trips, was now heading down an unfamiliar road, too far from anything he recognized. What puzzled him the most was that there was no sign it would stop anytime soon. From inside the vehicle, he watched his owners, the children laughing, the parents chatting. But there was something strange in the air, something Toby couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, the car slowed down until it came to a complete stop on the edge of a deserted road. The back door opened, and Toby, excited and confident as always, jumped out, wagging his tail enthusiastically. He expected a command, a pat, any gesture to show that this was just another fun adventure. But what followed was an unexpected silence. The engine roared to life again, and before Toby could realize it, the vehicle started to pull away. Desperate, he ran after the car, barking in an attempt to get his family's attention. But the vehicle kept accelerating, ignoring his pleas. His tail, which had been wagging happily, now hung between his legs, and his eyes reflected the confusion and sadness beginning to fill his heart. Finally, he stopped, exhausted, at the roadside, watching the car disappear into the horizon, taking with it everything Toby had known and loved. The road seemed endless and lonely, with the summer sun beating down on the asphalt, shimmering under his feet. The silence that followed the car's departure was almost unbearable. Toby looked around, searching for something familiar, but found only the warm wind stirring up dust in the air. He sniffed the ground and the dry bushes nearby, trying to catch even the faintest trace of the car that had abandoned him, but all that remained was an oppressive emptiness. As the loyal dog faced the harsh reality of being completely alone, the sadness and confusion that filled Toby's heart began to turn into a single certainty. He had to find his way back home. With that determination, he started following the trail of the car that had left him behind, guided by the familiar scent lingering in the air. At first, he walked steadily, believing he would soon catch up with his family. But as the hours passed and the sun climbed higher in the sky, the cruel reality began to unfold. Relentlessly, the deserted road seemed endless. There was no food, no water, and most painfully, no sign of his family. Toby felt the weight of loneliness and exhaustion growing with every step. When he finally spotted a small shadow beside a lone tree, he collapsed there, drained. His body trembled, and his mind desperately tried to understand why his owners had abandoned him. The silence around him was broken only by the rustling of the wind and the distant hum of insects. As night fell, the scorching heat gave way to a cold, dark atmosphere filled with unsettling sounds. The chirping of nocturnal insects and the distant noises of unknown animals heightened his sense of vulnerability. Despite this, something inside him urged him to keep going. He couldn't give up. The thirst was becoming unbearable, his mouth dry, and the exhaustion made his paws heavy. But the hope of returning home was the force that kept him moving. As the first rays of sunlight lit the road, Toby finally found a small stream. The sight of the crystal-clear water brought instant relief. He ran to it and drank eagerly, feeling energy slowly return to his body. For a moment, it felt like fate was smiling at him again. However, hunger soon took its place as the next challenge. With his nose close to the ground, he began sniffing around the stream, hoping to find something to satisfy his growing need for food. The days dragged on as Toby continued his journey, guided only by instinct and the hope of reuniting with his family. The path was cruel, bringing new challenges with every step. During the day, the scorching heat made walking almost unbearable, and at night, the biting cold was a constant reminder of his solitude. As if that weren't enough, the dangers of the road soon began to emerge. At one point, Toby found himself surrounded by a group of coyotes. Their eyes gleamed menacingly, teeth bared as low growls echoed around him. For a moment, fear froze Toby, but he reacted with courage, managing to scare them off. However, the encounter left its mark. His heart raced, and his mind, already burdened by exhaustion, now also wrestled with the tension of survival that seemed increasingly arduous. Despite everything, Toby did not give up. In his relentless search, he found small streams to quench his thirst, and with great effort, managed to catch small animals to stave off hunger. But with each passing day, the weight of fatigue grew heavier. Physical wear blended with emotional exhaustion, while the longing for his family burned in his heart, fueling the flame that kept him moving. One night, as he walked along the deserted road, Toby spotted an old abandoned cabin. With cautious steps, he approached, sniffing the air for signs of danger. Feeling safe, he entered and found a corner where he could finally lie down and rest. The place was simple, but the roof over his head and the sense of shelter brought temporary relief. As his eyes closed, Toby was overwhelmed by dreams of home. The familiar scents, the warmth of hands stroking his head, the laughter of children. When dawn came, bringing with it the soft light and fresh morning air, Toby felt a renewed strength. The brief rest in the cabin seemed to have rekindled his determination. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but something inside him urged him to keep going. Each step was more than just a journey. It was a testament to his loyalty, a witness to the unwavering love he felt for those he once called family. The temporary shelter he had found the previous night had given him some relief, but it wasn't enough to quell the growing need to return home. After drinking some water from a puddle formed by the previous night's rain, Toby resumed his journey. As he moved down the road, something began to change. He started noticing signs that made his heart race. Trees that seemed familiar appeared along the way, and the distinct scent of the soil brought vivid memories of his home surroundings. With every step, his hope was renewed. Perhaps he was closer to home than he had imagined. It was as if destiny was finally guiding him to where he had always wanted to be. The sky, once clear and sunny, began to transform. Dark clouds loomed on the horizon, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed, heralding the imminent arrival of a storm. Sensing the danger, Toby quickened his pace, trying to find shelter before the rain began. But the storm was faster. Within minutes, the sky unleashed a torrential downpour that soaked his fur, making every movement heavier and more exhausting. The wind howled around him, pushing him from side to side and hindering his progress. Thunder rumbled through the deserted road, shaking the ground, while lightning split the sky, illuminating the bleak scene. Desperate, Toby looked around, searching for refuge, but there was nothing, only the endless road and the relentless storm. Water streamed down his exhausted body, and the loneliness felt heavier than ever. Despair began to creep in, but Toby did not yield. Something within him, greater than fear and exhaustion, drove him onward. Each lightning strike illuminating the sky brought the faces of his family to his mind, the home he loved so dearly. It was as if these memories gave him the strength to continue, even amid the chaos of the storm. With unwavering determination, Toby pressed on, battling the elements. He knew that each step, no matter how difficult, brought him closer to the place he called home. Then, through the curtain of rain, he spotted a small structure in the distance, a worn, old wooden bridge stretching over a river. Without hesitation, he ran toward it and, finding shelter beneath the structure, finally experienced a moment of relief from the storm. His soaked and exhausted body collapsed onto the dirt ground. All he could hear was the constant sound of rain hitting the planks above his head. Even so, he knew the journey was far from over. But in that moment, the temporary shelter and the rhythmic sound of rain were all he needed to fall asleep. And as he slept, his mind took him back home. In his dreams, he could see the front door, smell the freshly cut grass in the yard, and hear the laughter of children running around him. It was as if he were back in the safety and warmth of home. For a brief moment, Toby forgot the hard and lonely road he was traveling. When he awoke, he felt renewed, not just physically, but also in spirit. In the days that followed, those memories became more than just recollections. They turned into a compass, guiding him back to where he belonged. As he walked, he mentally relived precious moments with his family. He remembered lazy mornings on the couch, joyful outings to the park, and cold nights when he slept at his owner's feet, feeling the warmth of the love that surrounded him. These memories not only comforted him, but also seemed to give meaning to the journey. With each new place he passed, something within him stirred another memory. Crossing a field full of wildflowers, he recalled the children picking flowers to decorate the kitchen table. Toby walked slowly, but his mind was full of memories. When he came upon a small hill along the way, he paused for a moment and remembered times when he ran with his family on similar terrain, playing chase as the children laughed. These precious moments rekindled his hope and gave him the strength to keep going. He felt that he was getting closer to home, but the weight of the journey was beginning to take its toll. His body was visibly thinner and weaker with each passing day. Food was scarce, and he could barely get enough to keep himself going. The signs of exhaustion were becoming alarmingly apparent. Even so, Toby refused to give up. He knew his home was somewhere ahead, waiting for him, and that was all he needed to continue. It wasn't time to stop. He had come too far. Finally, as he reached the top of the hill, Toby stopped and looked into the distance. His heart raced. There, on the horizon, was the familiar silhouette of the neighborhood where he had lived with his family. It was as if the world around him froze for a moment while he absorbed what he was seeing. A wave of renewed determination swept over him, and he began descending the hill with more energy than he had felt in days. Each step now felt lighter, quicker, driven by the familiar scent of the place he loved so much. He could feel it. He was close, very close to finding everything he had lost. Toby's heart pounded as he descended the hill. The aroma of the neighborhood surrounded him, that well-known and comforting scent. He had never forgotten it. With every step, he felt closer to something he had been searching for tirelessly, his home. When he finally reached the bottom of the hill, his eyes caught a glimpse that made his breath catch. There it was, the white fence enclosing the garden of his old house. Toby stopped, exhausted but overcome with indescribable emotion. He was there, so close to everything he loved, and nothing else mattered. Seeing the familiar yard, Toby felt a wave of relief, quickly mingled with anxiety. Was he really home? His heart raced as he approached, filled with hope that his family would be there to welcome him. But something troubled him. The grass was taller than he remembered, and the garden, once well-kept, looked neglected, as if no one had been there for a long time. A sense of emptiness filled the air, one he couldn't quite understand. Even so, Toby continued. Each step was guided by the hope of reuniting with those he loved so dearly. When he finally reached the back door, the place where he had always been greeted with love and joy, he noticed something undeniably different. There were no sounds coming from inside the house, no indication that his family was there. The empty yard and the almost deafening silence deepened his loneliness. It was as if the home he longed for was physically there, but somehow unreachable. Toby lay down near the door, waiting. He believed that at any moment, someone would come to embrace him, to welcome him back as before. But time passed, and the house remained silent. The hours dragged on, and with them, doubt began to creep into his mind. Had he made a mistake? Perhaps his family had truly moved on, leaving him behind. The weight of this possibility made the world feel even emptier, but Toby stayed, holding on to the last spark of hope. Sadness began to overwhelm him, pulling him into despair. But before he could be completely consumed by it, something unexpected happened. A sound from inside the house caught his attention. It was faint but distinct, like something falling. Toby lifted his head, alert, ears perked. The sound came again, and this time he realized it was the sound of water. His instincts immediately told him something was wrong. Without a second to lose, he got up and ran around the house, following the sound that now seemed more urgent. When he reached the side where a low fence separated the yard from the pool, Toby froze at the sight of something that made his heart race. There, in the water, the family's baby was struggling to stay afloat, tiny arms flailing in desperation as its small body was already partially submerged. The world seemed to stop in that moment. Toby, panting, watched the scene, unable to comprehend how this had happened. The baby was at the mercy of the water, and the panic in its movements made it clear there was no time to spare. Every second was precious. Toby felt a wave of determination surge through him. Without hesitation, he made a decisive leap, clearing the fence and running to the edge of the pool. Without regard for his own exhaustion, he plunged into the water. The shock of the cold was immediate, but he ignored it entirely. The density of the water made every movement difficult, but nothing would stop him from reaching the baby. His protective instincts took over as he swam with all his strength, each stroke a colossal effort. When Toby finally reached the baby, he gently grabbed its clothing with his mouth, taking care not to hurt it. With the little one secure, he began swimming back toward the pool's edge. The added weight of the baby made each stroke an almost unbearable challenge. For a moment, Toby felt his strength fading, as though the accumulated fatigue of his long journey was finally taking its toll. But the determination to save that life outweighed any exhaustion. With one last desperate effort, he reached the edge of the pool. Using his front paws, Toby managed to push the baby out of the water. The little one was drenched, crying loudly but alive. The mission was accomplished. Exhausted, Toby used the last of his strength to climb out of the pool. His body trembled from the cold and fatigue, but he lay down next to the baby, licking its wet face as if to comfort it and ensure it was safe. At that moment, the parents came running, alerted by the baby's cries. Upon seeing the scene, they froze, overwhelmed with shock. Their eyes widened as they processed what had just happened. There, in front of them, was Toby, completely soaked and panting, beside the baby he had just saved. The impact of the scene hit them like lightning. The initial fright gave way to overwhelming emotion. The parents rushed to the baby, scooping it into their arms and checking to see if it was okay. When they realized the little one was alive thanks to Toby's heroic act, tears began to flow. The father, still holding the baby, knelt beside Toby, stroking his wet head with tearful eyes. "You saved us," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. The mother, equally overwhelmed, let her tears fall as she whispered words of gratitude. It was hard to believe what had just happened. The tragedy that had seemed inevitable was averted by this dog who, even exhausted and frail, had not hesitated to risk everything. Toby, completely drained, could barely keep his eyes open. But even in his state of utter exhaustion, he could feel the love and relief now emanating from his family. The warmth of that moment enveloped him, and he knew he was finally home, where he had always belonged.